So we're going to be bringing in Cathy Vogan next, Dame Cathy Vogan. She is a filmmaker, a musician, and an independent journalist at thingtothing.com. And she is the host of the breakfast show on radio 2RSR. Cathy?
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi. I hope you.
Hi. How are you?
I'm alive. How are you?
Good. Well, I'm okay. It's 5:30 in the morning here in Sydney.
It's 10:32 here in Moscow.
Right. And I've it's been a true vigil for me because I've tried to stay awake all night.
I hope you have your coffee or other stimulant available.
Hey, I do. I caught about an hour's sleep because I was just dozing off. But I wasn't really sleeping. I was listening to what you two had to say. And I listened, had another listen into your one of your last talks, just to remind myself of what I'd heard the last time you spoke, which just completely blew me away. Well, I'm an artist. Living in Sydney.
But for those who don't know, why don't you introduce yourself in your own words for the guests out there who haven't aren't as familiar with you before.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an Australian artist. Australian, Irish, Franco. I've lived around the world and lived in different language-speaking countries. But so I was in France for 16 years and didn't speak English for about 7. But I came back to the place I consider my home after 16 years away. I still call Australia home. That's a terrible song that a lot of patriots sing, but it's quite a nice sentimental song that touches your heart when you've been living away from home for a long time. So I was never really interested in, I was interested in politics, but I didn't feel the ability to really make any kind of call because I didn't have the actual information, the facts, whereby I could make that sure call about what my position was. And I guess what intelligence agencies and even private intelligence agencies have been doing for some time predict what is going to happen in the future. I didn't feel that any individual citizen, even an artist with their antennae up, could really make out what was going on in the world today until 2000. Well, it was before 2010 because we in Australia heard about Julian a long time before 2010. He was occasionally coming on the news, and I was going, I'm going to keep an eye on what this person is doing, because I remember having a conversation back in 2009, and it was within the context of what we were going to do as a musical band, because I was involved with some musicians back then. And I remember having a meeting, and the phrase that kept going through my head at the time, and it was going to be the title of the new album, was Firewall of Failure. I thought that had a nice ring to it, but I thought, look, there's something in there that is I'm not just talking about the state here. I'm talking about all of the firewalls for banks, for private corporations. How come we can't see? We have a problem here because all of these firewalls are being built whereby there is less and less transparency in the world, and this is going to be our undoing. And I kept watching out of the corner of my eye what Julian Assange and WikiLeaks were doing, and I think there was a few major releases. So that, what I recalled was Kenya, what happened in Kenya, and it was very good. Justice was brought, and a change of government. And then after that, I think there was Climategate. So it wasn't too good, Climategate, but it still put things in perspective. We've got to be transparent on all sides, right? And then, of course, in 2010, there was Collateral Murder, which just, brought everyone in. And, that's what it came down to, the brutality of being somebody like me, a journalist, a photographer, someone whose job it was to just, record what was going on, and that those people being in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing their job, gunned down in the streets of Baghdad with other civilians. And the other problem was that Reuters for 2 or 3 years, I think, were trying to find out what happened to those journalists. So when that came out, it wasn't just the brutality of being a civilian in the street. We were also faced with that reality of a war machine that didn't want to tell the world about all these kinds of incidents. And then, of course, the Afghan war logs. It all came as such a shock to me and other people that we felt that we needed to do something about it. And that's when I jumped on a bus. I've talked about this in the first vigil. That's when I took a day off teaching, because I teach film. Mm-hmm. And I jumped on a bus to go to our capital, Canberra, because Julian Assange's mother, Christine Assange, was going there to try and speak at the same time that Barack Obama was visiting our country to sign a military alliance with our Prime Minister. That was a funny day. There was oh dear, there's just this these chants that you do at demos, and that was my first, and that I thought that was Christine's first as well, but maybe she'd been in the audience, but she had never been, in the front. There to speak and to lead such a charge. As then we were. So
that was the first protest you've ever been to?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, actually. Yes and no, because I remember when I came back to visit Australia in 2002, I believe it was, there was an enormous protest about not going into the Iraq war. And so I think there were nearly 1 million people in Australia across all, we're only 25 million people now. And so that was really something that and Australian people are not very good at getting out and protesting, especially in Sydney. Melbourne's quite good, but Sydney isn't. So, we all, I was just back here on holidays. I came back every year because I kind of missed the place by then, and I would come back to live a year later. And so I took part in this anti-Iraq protests. And I think, yes, you're now reminding me that when I was a university student, I protested uranium against our export of uranium. And I think that might have frightened me off for a long time, because I nearly got the crap beaten out of me, except a certain Prime Minister rescued me and pulled me out of the way as police were getting closer and closer with batons. They were pretty brutal, as they have been in America, in suppressing those voices when they weren't used to hearing them. So that was a long time before. But really, this one was one where I was a filmmaker. I had a central role to play. There was nobody else there who was there to film Julian's mother specifically. In fact, some people had, brought up some handy cams along, but I being working in broadcast and teaching, that kind of thing, I brought serious equipment, and I felt that it was my job to I said when we were getting off the bus, I'll take the WikiLeaks poster, placard, and Christine Assange heard me, and she went, oh my goodness, somebody here that's defending WikiLeaks. So she asked me to stay close by her, and I do recall saying this before. So really, it was kind of the first time where we had that responsibility, the both of us, to carry the protest and to represent it, for her to speak, for me to film her, and to start working to put this out to the world, because the responsibility was actually falling on me. I was the only person there to do that. But we had to walk up a very steep hill. It was 38 degrees. And neither of us were used to doing that kind of thing. You had to shout while you were walking up this hot hill in the heat. And so I was pretty terrified, and it looked like Christine she was quite pale as well. And then she rang me a couple of days later. I filmed her and put it out. And she rang me 2 days later, and we spoke for about 3 hours. And I offered to make a documentary for WikiLeaks.
So you've seen the real inside relations, with Julian and his family, from a very early day. You've seen an insight that most of us, really have no idea into the personal character here.
Yes, I know both of Julian's parents very well. I took a little bit of a break. Christine sort of withdrew a little bit, I think around 2013. And I was still interested in the topic, but there was nothing like Unity for Jay happening. So we hadn't spoken to each other for quite a while until I interviewed her on the 9th of August. This year. We hadn't actually spoken to each other for 5 years, believe it or not. But in fact, there was something in common between when I spoke to her 3 weeks ago and when I first met her back in 2011. It was a cliffhanger, a crisis moment where we didn't know what was going to happen next. My heart went out to her as a mother, but my mind was totally engaged by, how smart Christine was, how she had her head around the whole situation. And so I began helping WikiLeaks. I couldn't put out a documentary. The reason being was that it was a crisis every single day. And to actually make a feature-length documentary, you have to get all this stuff, footage accumulated. And then as a broadcast editor, when I was cutting long formats for other people, it was pretty well 6 weeks from go to woe. Once you've shot everything and the director and producer have a vague idea of what they want to do. But it was just like every day, at least nearly every other day, there was something that was happening. There were people like Joe Biden and Sarah Palin, these terrible accusations that, Julian was a high-tech terrorist, WikiLeaks was a terrorist organization, and actual calls for his assassination. And this, to us hobbits over here in Australia, no, sorry, I shouldn't say hobbits because that's my New Zealand buddies, but we are, we feel like we're out on the edge.
For the geeks out there, if they're the hobbits, then you're the people in Bree.
Yeah, it was a real shock to our system that one of our own was being attacked in this way, set up in every way possible. We thought we couldn't believe our ears to hear the kinds of calls that were being made. And so that really bound people together as we watched these accusations and calls for Julian's assassination being uttered. And so I said to Christine, this is actually, Christine, this is too urgent. Every one of these things that people that I'm filming, and she had to ask a number of people if they would trust me. And that was people I thought I'd never meet in this lifetime, like Daniel Ellsberg and Noam Chomsky. And I was, they said that, all right, well, and so I went to America even and met them. And so everything ended up being more like news rather than a contemplative documentary where you can sit back and try and get your head hot around the whole thing. I am glad at that point in time I did speak in 2012 at the WikiLeaks conference, I should say. And that was after I'd been around the world, and Christine had launched an Australian tour of a conference that was called WikiLeaks and Democracy, which premiered in Sydney. And in fact, when it premiered, I wasn't even back in the country yet. I think I was in France by the time it screened. And so what I did was I got about an 18-minute compilation together to open this conference around the country that was going to each city. With Chomsky, Ellsberg, a really fantastic human rights lawyer, Australian lawyer, QC, in fact, Julian Burnside, John Pilger, another wonderful Australian journalist, and a great American writer, Nozomi Hayase. So the collective wisdom in that really spoke for itself, and it that opened the conference each time, and it really clued people into the actual legal situation, which is one thing. I mean, the legal situation is absurd, but I think what it needs to do, it needed to do, and it did do, especially with John Pilger, was to really engage people in a very personal way to do whatever they could to help. And so what happened was a little bit with what I was doing back then in 2011 to 13 was very similar to what's happening now with Unity for J. There's these moments where...
say that you guys are the originals, the precursor of what is now being done digitally with many of the same people and the same themes repeated, again with new context, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I did some of my interviews via Skype, but I had to pre-record them, and then I would put them out on YouTube. But
you guys were the OG.
Sorry, the OG.
The OG, sorry? The original, right? The original.
Oh, all right. Oh, well, yeah. But there wasn't this immediacy of us being able to speak in real time across the world. You know, I've been thinking about, this age that we're now in, very much in the prehistory of the digital age we are. But this has been a quantum leap in human consciousness. I mean, something like the printing press, which was rather controlled and restrictive, and not everybody could have access even to read books. But I was thinking today that being able to communicate with each other in real time, which is a very, very recent thing. 2006, I believe, that Apple brought out the first codec, H.264. Sorry, that's my geeky thing coming out. Whereby video could be streamed on the internet full screen, and this was the standard definition, without looking all pixelated, or otherwise, if it was clear, it was a postage stamp. But that was only 12 years ago that we were actually able to play video on the internet. And now we've got with social media, YouTube 2006, Facebook. I got an invitation originally, and I thought it was a dating site, and I really insulted somebody. Don't you ever send me anything like that again. They want my private information. Are you kidding? But I actually did.
Is it a dating site?
Well, it was so much like the inner relationship, or it's complicated, was very much in the, very prominent back then, and I really bought. But I think within little time, I saw that people were starting to do other things with this than look for potential mates. And then there was just this wonderful growth where, like the hashtag on Twitter, the people invented what they could do with it. So I remember that like in 2010, 11 and 12, there was just this explosion of people, becoming activists and realizing that they could broadcast. We had this, the story of the global village, back in it was around since the 60s, that we had, I don't know if you know these artists, American artists, Kit Galloway and Sherry Rabanovitz. I know an American producer who worked in the American Center in Paris. So he'd worked with these people, and he was one of the first, Don Forrester, his name is. He still lives in Paris. So he'd worked with all these people to create a window in space across America. So I don't know if you know about it, but it was shop windows, I think in maybe San Francisco and New York. And it wasn't really announced, but the windows were set up with speakers, so people could just see after a while, oh my goodness, that's live. And within little time, the windows were completely crowded with family members who wanted to connect with their folks who were on the other side of the continent. And it was this miracle about a window in space where, we could forget about distance. We could come together and talk to each other in real time. And since that time, America has done great things in facilitating this. We, as a byproduct, perhaps have been absolutely saturated with American politics. We still are. Every day we get it in our face. We know all about Trump here in Australia. We know, I actually know more about international, but especially American politics than I do about local Australian politics up, in North Queensland, for example. You hear a little bit about it, but do I know all the names of the politicians? American ones, yes. And, I thought, well, that's all right, and we got that idea with Occupy that it doesn't really matter how far away we are from each other. Social media evolved as this space where minds could connect. Over time, you would find like-minded people, you would connect, educate each other. And I do remember posing a question to Daniel Ellsberg if he thought this immediacy of the internet was something that would actually heighten empathy. And because you could see these people who are starving. You can see their wounds from having been bombed and, live from Gaza and all that. And, he thought that was really, a very strong possibility. But I strongly believed in it because it was happening to me. I was connecting with people in other countries that before that I never knew what was happening in their lives. They were numbers. It was abstract. In fact, most people didn't know at all. And so in that way, we started turning into an international community. And we thought that was great. I have friends in America. I have friends here. And then all of a sudden, after 2016, suddenly America said, well, no, it's going to be a one-way thing. We'll still continue to saturate you with our politics and culture, but you don't have the right to comment on that. Essentially, we're in that position now, and starting to really interfere with our communications.
Are you seeing the same thing I am with it all? Trying to selectively prune and manage it. I mean, we've seen Telesur taken off of Facebook, Craig Murray, Peter Van Buren on Twitter. I mean, do you see this as a threat to what you view as the positive aspects of social media?
Well, hell, I can tell you exactly. I mean, yes, the answer is yes. But the day before yesterday, I've become very good friends with, it's funny, uh, James Spioni, who is the director of a wonderful documentary called Silenced, which is the story of Thomas Drake, Jesslyn Radek, and John Kiriakou, right? It's, you know.
I'm a good friend of his, at least on radio, yes.
Yeah, and I actually, you know, James had put out a crowdfunding thing. I chipped in $50. You'll see my name on the credits, helping produce James's film. James said when I was interviewing Ellsberg, that's how our interview began, because I'm saying, "Oh, have you heard? Have you heard? James's film, Incident in New Baghdad, which was about Ethan McCord, has been nominated for an Oscar," and Daniel and I are cheering. We realised that we're mates. So I was talking to James Spioni on his wall. We were all chatting together, and I'm just getting sent a message here.
Yeah, they're about to shut us down here.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So as we were all talking, and James was actually, his post was about John McCain. And as we were all talking, I could see James's comments being systematically deleted. There was still the James Spioni and the 5 likes, but the comment was just gone. And we were just watching all of the comments, micromanaging our conversation. Like, even between us, we couldn't say anything bad about John McCain. And I had, you know, it really drove home just how intricately we are being managed. I mean, I think that this level of communication between people, like-minded people, is something that, as far as the state is concerned, has got completely out of hand. It seemed like a great idea.
Yeah, it's control, but you can turn it against them. You can turn it against them.
Yeah,
Cathy,
yeah.
If I could ask you 2 questions I've been dying to ask you, you know, before they cut us off here. If you could let, you know, us, you know, the people out there listening, if you're working on anything that they should be paying attention to, you know, as an artist or an activist in the near future, and if you could get a care package to Julian in the embassy in London tomorrow, what would be in it?
Wow. Yeah, so I would prefer to actually refer people to the interview that I did with Julian Assange on the 9th of August. So that was part of the Sydney event, the gagging of Julian Assange. And we had Susie Dawson participate as well. So there is that 2-hour program. There's also a standalone of Christine's interview. It covers so much about the legal aspects. She's right across it. She's 100% accurate in terms of the factual content. And it also talks a lot about his health, what the doctors have been saying since, well, February this year, and nothing's being done, that he's dying. So that is a very, very moving interview. And I don't say a great deal. I do say a bit as it goes on, but I let her talk because she will deliver the exact situation. And it's very rare to hear Christine. She doesn't give interviews to mainstream media, so it's precious. Now the care package. I don't know, I've heard people asking if he has a television. I mean, I hate television. I hate that passivity, you know, where you just never know what's, you know, oh, I missed the beginning or whatever. That lack of your ability to really focus and choose a particular topic. But since he seems to have lost everything else, maybe something to get a little bit of, you know, stimulation, books, but I'm not quite sure. I mean, I'm not quite sure what he's read. Oh, gee, I don't know. He had a sun lamp, and he had an exercise machine when he first went to the Ecuadorian embassy. It looks like he hasn't been using his sun lamp. Is it broken? He needs his vitamin D. But, you know, really just an expression of some of the stats for Unity for J, that we've, you know, had 40 million impressions on the hashtag. And how many? 220,000 views on Periscope. No, I'm right into community. So I'd love him to understand that that community is really on the up and up again, that people around the world are profoundly touched by this. And because we are so many in Unity for J, there's nearly 3,000 of us, that we're actually, I've heard we're outperforming the mainstream media in turning public opinion back towards the truth again, and not all of the surreal bullshit that you hear.
I'm sure that would give them a lot of comfort.
Yeah. So I don't know, what would you put in the care package?
Well, I don't know what Julian drinks, but I think he could probably enjoy a good stiff drink too, myself.
Whiskey.
Yeah.
Yes, if you've seen the cypherpunks.
If anyone deserves it, he does. And you know, unfortunately, the one thing that I know I couldn't live without, the internet for access to information, we probably can't get that to him. So.
I know. I just keep thinking of how could we just, you know, select an array of things. Maybe that's what I'd send him. I'd send him a hard drive with everything that I'd collected that was just really fantastic that was happening in the last 4.5 months since he went offline. I would send him all that on a hard drive so that he could enjoy it. John Pilger said that he would do his best to see if Julian could be had the talk that John Pilger did in Sydney for him. That was an amazing talk.
Cathy, yeah. It has been an honor and a pleasure for me to speak to you, and I'm going to relay pass off now and let you. I'm going to hit the sack here in Moscow, and I'm going to let you carry on with Lee.
It's been a pleasure to talk to you too. I'd love to just sit down and go through all the things that you as a nuclear in nuclear engineering had things that had happened in your work life, but maybe that's another conversation.
We will do that someday. We will do that.
That would be great. That would be great.
Take care and good night, everyone out there.